Morning, everyone. Hope you had a wonderful week and glad to see you all here this week. This time of year is especially a busy time of year as we prepare for the feast. It's busy all year round. I mean, it really gets busy around the feast time, but I want you to think about your life in context of what you do on a regular basis. Oftentimes you'll get up Monday morning. If you're a full-time worker, you'll get up, you'll make that pot of coffee, make sure you get that. That's number one thing. We want to make sure we get the coffee. That's the wonderful juice for the day. You get ready for work, you have kids, you got to get them up, the breakfast is cooked, the lunches are prepared to be made, make sure the homework's ready for the kids. You take them to school, you get off work, the daily routine, the grind, the surprises, the challenges that happen, and the difficulties that come with your line of work, whatever you're in. Maybe you work from home, or the housework needs to be done. There's 4 loads of laundry. There's colors, whites, there's towels, there's delicates. The kitchen needs cleaning. The beds need made. The fridge is running out of food. There's no dinner that you've planned for. Now you've got to plan for that. Meal planning for the week. Floors to clean. Gifts to send. Cards to write. Bathrooms to clean. Projects galore. Kids to teach. Field trips to take. Whew. And you may have had some overtime you had to do, and you had to catch up with some projects. Maybe you had to work over lunch. Maybe you had to stay late for your routine. Then you came back home, fixed dinner. Maybe it was too late for dinner. You grabbed something on the way home, or you went out just because it seemed easier. And then there's the cleanup from all the daily dirt that comes around, and there's homework with kids to make sure they're ready for the next day. Maybe you have some small projects you have to do at the house, 1 or 2 you want to get done in the evening. Put the kids in bed, spend a few minutes with your sweetie for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. Maybe you want to lounge in front of the TV for 30 minutes. Maybe it's 3 hours. Maybe it's nothing because you didn't have time for it that day. And don't forget that somewhere in there you have prayers and you have Bible study. Readings, and if you're a message speaker, you prepare sermonettes or sermons or whatever you need to do. And there's a lot of stuff that I missed in between. And that's just a normal week. And then you throw the holy days in and it gets even crazier. Folks, not only is this life that God gave us, let me repeat that. Let me say that again. This is not the only life that God has given us to live. We have a life to come. That we look forward to. In this life, there are some third world countries today that live like they did 5,000 years ago. In other words, the women, the majority of their day are spent getting water, going down to the well or going down to the river and traveling back and forth. And that's the majority of their day, getting water and fixing the meals. And that's pretty much it. Unless you had a servant that you could get the water and stuff for you. But men oftentimes would have back-breaking labor unless they were highly skilled to try and bring enough money in to keep food on the table and clothes on your back. Most of us say, I wish there was more time in the day. I mean, who hasn't said that? I wish there were 2 of me. I wish I had 48 hours in the day. But I suggest to you that more time in the day would simply be more time to waste. God, in His eternal wisdom, has given us the time that we need to accomplish those things that are necessary for us in this life. And in most cases, we need to learn to organize our time to accomplish those tasks that are given to us to perform. Jesus had the same 24 hours that we do. 12 hours in the day, 12 hours at night that we're given. And while Jesus could have done a great deal more with more time, He balanced that time that He had perfectly. He balanced that time perfectly. So the question is, how did He get it all done? And how did He balance the demands of His work and His ministry that I know had to leave Him physically exhausted at times? I'd like you to turn to Mark chapter 1. I want to show you something I think is quite significant here in Mark chapter 1. In the Gospel of Mark, after Jesus had called His disciples, they came to a town called Capernaum, a town that He visited often. And I want to pick up the story here in verse 21 of Mark chapter 1. Actually, let's look it down at verse 35. Mark 1:35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." And Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. One of the greatest challenges is finding balance in the Christian life. And in Mark chapter 1, we get a clue to how Jesus did it. So I have 2 points for you this morning. Not 3, I have 2. Number 1 is, look to God, not to others, to determine your priorities. Look to God and not to others to determine your priorities. So Jesus determined his priorities by spending time with the Father. Look carefully here. It says Jesus got up and he left the house and he went away to a secluded place and he prayed there. So he got in communion with his Father to determine his priorities. And then it says Simon and his companions searched for him, and when they found him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." Everyone was trying to find Jesus where he was. And he said, "Well, let us go somewhere else to the towns nearby so that I can preach there also. For that," he says, "for that is what I came here for." That's why he came. The question is, how could Jesus walk away from the needs that only he could meet? How could he do something like this? He could have stayed and he could have spent a great deal of time healing more people, but instead, he followed the ultimate will of the Father. He didn't devote all of his time and attention on one specific thing to the exclusion of everything else. We see that problem today in the way we're dealing with this pandemic, actually. Remember when Jesus was praying in the garden before his crucifixion, and he said in John chapter 17, you can refer to this in verse 4, "I have brought you glory on earth by completing the work you gave me to do." He says, I completed that work. He did everything that was expected of him by the Father. Everything. He completed the work. And yet somehow, he didn't stay there to heal more people, to teach more people. But he completed the work. He said that he completed the work that God had given him to do. So our Heavenly Father set the priority for Jesus, and Jesus followed it. And he had much more in mind for Jesus other than a healing ministry. Now that was part of it, certainly, but it fit in the overall context and picture of the purpose that Jesus came to earth for. The healing that Jesus performed was balanced with preaching and the other things that he needed to do. And even though the people would have preferred Jesus to choose differently, he was determined instead to please the Father. To achieve balance as well, it often takes us answering to someone else that makes us responsible to accomplishing something for others. Think about if you were a mother or a wife, if you're a mother or a wife, and what if you sat on your sofa all day long and you didn't do anything but watch TV, and your kids suffer, your husband suffers because you didn't take care of the needs that they had. See, you answer to them in that sense. That's what you're there for. You're held to help them. So you answer to them. They have needs as well. You may like to study the Bible, and maybe so much so that it's difficult to get your nose out of it. But there are other people that may be counting on you as well. They have needs, and your actions help them, not just your words. They need action. One of the balances for all of us speakers here, I think, is not to spend all of our time preparing messages. We have other things that we need to do as well. We need to not neglect others around us. We need to spend time with them. So the Father was counting on Jesus, and Jesus in return responded to the direction of his Father. Point number 2 is to say no so that you can say yes. Say no so that you can say yes. Jesus said no so that he could say yes to what was most important. He said no so he could say yes to what was most important. I think most of the time we know what's important. If we had choices put before us, we would understand the most important ones, I think, before us. Should I eat at McDonald's for the 5th day in a row? Or should I maybe eat a salad and a side of cottage cheese? That's your choice. You know, we know what to choose, I think. Should I pick up my kids from practice, or should I watch the latest episode of American Idol? No, you need to get your kids from practice. Should I flip through all of my social media apps and make sure I catch up on everything, or should I talk to my spouse? It's a no-brainer. See, these things are real simple. Those are simple choices, but there are times where decisions are not so simple, and choices that might seem simple to you might not be so simple to others, and vice versa. In this, we're all learning. But one way we can do this is by gleaning priorities from Scripture. And this can help us make more confident decisions amidst overwhelming demands. We can choose many things and end up missing the best things, the essential priorities. We tend to fall prey to, we want to do everything we can possibly do, and we exclude other things that should be done. Don't fall for the lie that states that a good Christian should never say no to legitimate needs. Don't fall trapped to that. Only when we know what to say yes to can we say no to everything else. It's been said that balance is like a pendulum. It's that brief moment in the middle when you're swinging from one string to the other. You hit it just for a moment, every once in a while. Part of our pursuit of balance contains the realization that it is never perfectly achieved, but the pursuit of balance is the goal. So don't be frustrated with that constant effort that we are always striving for. So my desire to make this sermonette more balanced, I wish I could have. With 3 points, I probably could have. I tried to make it insightful. I tried to make it reflective. But it was tempered by the fact that I had to say no so that I could read with my kids last night. So take advice from this, and brethren, remember that only when you know when to say yes, we can say no to everything else.